Hello, I am Mario Basile and this video is part of the basic course on Gentile Roman religion from MTR, the Movimento Tradizionale Romano, Traditional Roman Movement. The Gentile Roman religion is not based on the formulation of a creed or on a set of dogmas, but on the direct experience of the divine. From this point of view, the ritual practice is the very heart of the traditional religion, fixed and performed with precision and care. If you want to know the basic, follow me. Sometimes the etymology of a word explains its deep meaning. Ritus, the Latin word for rite, that has been actually transformed into English rite, but derives from the reconstructed root of the Proto-Indo-European hierei, to fix, to order, and it is evidently related to Sanskrit riti, that means ceremony, and also rta, that is the cosmic order, and perhaps also with the Greek arithmos, that is number and also rhythm. So ordering, counting and fixing, therefore, which is perfectly in line with what we saw in the previous lessons. I mean, ordering time with the calendar, defining the sacred space with the templum, and fixing the perfect action of sacred cosmic order. So the officiant, therefore, stands at the center of the space-time coordinates where he or she performs and experiments with the ritual the perfection of the divine dimension. Sacrifice is the fulcrum of the rite and must be perfect. While in some other religions efforts are made to define a distinction between accepted and rejected ideas, in the Gentile Roman religion the jus sacrum, which disciplines the relationships between people and divinities, introduces the concept of a correctly performed rite and separates it from what may be a wrong rite. The jus sacrum, over which the Pontifical College watched, provides the set of norms that regulate the just and right execution of the rite. An infraction, even if involuntary, creates a ritual imperfection, that is, an impurity, which must be corrected through another sacrifice called piamentum or piaculum. When the violation was evident, the correct repetition of the rite re-established the right relationship between the officiant and the divinity. Otherwise, the piaculum was performed anyway as a preventive measure in the event that there had been an infringement not spotted by the officiant. It should be noted that there were dozens of different sacrifices which depended on the divinity, on the context, and on the type of ritual itself. As already mentioned in the previous lesson, it is of fundamental importance for us to distinguish between the public and the private domain of the rite. The private or domestic rite gave rise to the public rite, which instead was inextricably linked to the state that financed it. The public rite marked the life of the res publica, guaranteeing its survival, and was performed by magistrates in charge. Unfortunately, today the res publica no longer exists. There is no state that requires its magistrates to perform public rites. Therefore, the Movimento Tradizionale Romano promotes only the private rite, considering not only deceptive but also contrary to the spirit of religion to promote forms of public rite to the gods in absence of the Roman state. Another important aspect is the type of offer. The rite could be with the sacrifice of an animal or could be bloodless. When it was with the sacrifice of an animal, the following animals were offered as victims, victimae or hostiae in Latin, depending on the divinity of the recurrence. So, another important aspect is the type of offer. The rite could be with the sacrifice of an animal or could be bloodless. When it was involving the sacrifice of an animal, the following animals were offered as victims, victimae or hostiae in Latin. And the animal was depending on the divinity and on the recurrence. So we could have cows, bulls, horses, sheep, pigs, dogs, and also fish. A particular combination was that of a pig, a sheep, and a bull, and it was called suove taurilia. Victims were chosen with care, considering their age, the coat color, the sex, and absence of imperfections. The Movimento Tradizionale Romano does not perform rituals with animal sacrifice, but only bloodless ritual in which the offer is made of libamina, that is pelt, milk, honey, wine, first fruits and harvest, salt, flowers, cakes, sweets, and the like. This occurs in full harmony with tradition and with the sources, as well as being justified by some philosophers of antiquity, such as Porphyry, for example. Before describing the typical sequence of a ritual, let's see the conditions under which you can participate, you can attend a ritual. The law of the 12 tables establishes ad deos caste adeunto, that is to approach the gods in a condition of chastity. It is necessary to wash first, and in fact outside the temples there were tubes and fountains to clean hands and feet. Fasting is not prescribed before the rite, but it is definitely better to avoid participating weighted down by food that is immediately after eating. Ideally, with regard to clothing, a candid, unblemished, unaged robe that has not been used in a funeral is prescribed. It is essential that the clothes are clean and tidy. It is also necessary to avoid wearing objects such as chains or symbols of any kind. In particular, it is necessary to avoid wearing leather and metals. Public rites generally begin in the morning. The first part of the rite consists in approaching the altar. If the rite is private, the paterfamilias, so the head of the family, precedes the family towards the altar, which is located in a shared place of the house. In public rites, generally, a magistrate led a procession followed by the pontifex or a priest, the camilli, who assisted the priest during the ritual, the victimarius, who led the animals, often garlanded, to the altar, and the tibicini, who were playing bone flutes for the ritual, and also the calatori, who were assistants to the most important offices, and the haruspices. When the procession arrived in front of the altar, the magistrate or priest would say, "Proculeste profani," to drive away anyone who does not attend the rite, including demons. Then The callatore imposed silence, the callator, with the formula favete linguis, and the Thebians begins to play the flutes to cover any extraneous noise. The priest suggested the precise formulas to the sacrificer, who repeated them with precision. The formula of the prayer is immutable, recited slowly and aloud, with the following components. First, the identification of the deity being celebrated. Second, identification of the applicant. Third, the nature of the offer. Fourth, request on what to obtain and when. For modern sensibility, animal sacrifice is extremely bloody. But we need to imagine what the ancient world was like, where people were used to kill animals for food. Killing a sheep, a calf, or a pig at home was accepted as normal. Today, most of us who are not vegetarians buy steak from the supermarket and can hardly bring them back to the image of the veal. Having done this preamble, let's see how the sacrifice took place. Initially, in the praefatio, the priest poured wine and incense over the fire lit in a portable hearth or brazier. The fire with the emanated fumes is the means to transmit the offerings to the divinity. In fact, the fire with its transforming action represents the identity of the officiant. The praefatio was followed by the immolatio. The victim is carried without pulling to the altar with a slow rope and is sprinkled with salsamola, a sauce mixture of spelt and salt, thus resulting immolated, that is consecrated for the sacrifice. The priest used to slide the coulter, sacrificial knife for the symbolic killing, passing from the victim's forehead along the back to the tail. At that point, the executor asked for permission to carry out the killing by asking, agone? When the priest replied, hoc age, the executor carried out the killing. The victim's blood spilled on the altar. Later, the victim was cut for organ extraction. In particular, the haruspex interpreted the liver according to a millenary tradition. The bowels were then sprinkled with wine and oil and burnt on the altar as a part due to the divinity. What was left over was considered free from divinity and could be consumed after the conclusion of the rite by the participants, or sold, or given away. At the end of the ritual, if the priest believed that no infringement had been made, he would recite the final propitiatory formula, quod bonum felix fortunatum faustumque sit mihi, and the meeting was declared dissolved when the priest declared illicet. The reason why we at MTR can continue to be in the tradition while not making bloody sacrifices is because libamina can be made, that is, as mentioned, spelt, milk, honey, wine, first fruits of the harvest, salt, flowers, cakes, sweets, and the like, and above all, incense. Furthermore, if the ritual involved a bloody sacrifice, tradition allows to use a reproduction of the victim to be sacrificed made of bread, wax, or even with terracotta figures. This offer, according to sources, is also acceptable and perfectly fits contemporary sensibility. 2 words on prayer. When praying, the officiant does not kneel, as the Greek did, but remaining standing, he expresses himself in a solemn and composed manner, keeping his head covered to defend himself or herself from negative influences. If the prayer is addressed to the higher gods, the person praying raises his arm with open hand. If to the underworld gods, his hands are turned toward the ground, and so his gaze. The greeting to the gods or their image takes place by addressing a kiss osculum, bringing the closed index finger and thumb on the right hand to the lips, then touching the statue, or symbolically throw to the direction of the deities, as explained in the previous lesson. The site of the traditional Roman movement, Saturnia Tellus, offers interesting articles on the whole sphere concerning the Gentile Roman religion. So if you don't know it, I invite you to give a look to our online magazine, which has also a section in English. And besides, there is a kind of translator, automatic translator, that works pretty well. You don't have a Shakespeare-like version, but you can at least understand the meaning on what is written. I also want to add that if you have any question about the material presented so far, or even constructive criticisms, suggestions, or simply want to write to me, you can contact me at the following email addresses: mtr.didactica@gmail.com. In the next lesson, we will deal with domestic or private worship. So thank you so much for following. Vale bene in pace Deorum.